Hey everybody, welcome to Highly Unlikely with Josh and Jenaye. We're back, and it's going to be a great one.
Yes.
We are joined today by a great friend, the great Alaskan, Steve Pavek.
Yes.
And Steve and I went to college together, but since then, we've both moved on and are doing ministry, and Steve is single-handedly, and with the Lord's help and some other good people, just taking the state of Alaska for Jesus. And so in a real awesome way. And so we're going to talk about that today. But before we do, Steve, we're going to introduce you to everybody through having you answer a question from the bowl, which could be
I'm going to pull from the middle.
Insightful or semi-awkward.
Yeah. Let's see.
All right.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
Should we change it to what did you want to be?
I think I still have some growing up to do.
Are we not grown up?
Listen, that's actually a really easy question. I want to be Josh Hall.
I knew you were going to say that.
I
you don't.
I mean, like, there's like astronaut, like Navy SEAL, and then like Josh Haldal is a much loftier goal.
Yeah.
But my parents told me I need to aim high, so I'll aim high.
Oh my gosh.
Steve, you go fishing for Alaskan salmon and have orcas eat the fish right off the line. Like
You just see grizzly bears.
Your life is
fine.
something to aspire to.
Yes. No, you need to be a lot more like you. I did want to be a dentist, an endodontist to be specific.
Endodontist?
Yes, they do root canals. They make a lot of money. That's why I wanted to do it. So, that doesn't last long in God's will. So that didn't happen.
If you heard root canal and didn't know what somebody was talking about, you would have no idea it had to do with the mouth.
True. There's probably a lot of things like that.
I'm just saying.
So, yeah, I was told Alicia Weston I want to be her when I grow up because she's so organized. So that's my job.
Have we changed this question into who we want to be when we grow up?
Well, I answered. I wanted to be a dentist, and now I want to be Alicia Weston.
An endodontist.
I will say I had this dream. I was like a really weird kid, and I was very like realistic about my athletic ability. So I stopped dreaming about becoming a Minnesota Twin at about age 8, and then started to aim to become the Minnesota Twins radio announcer.
Yes.
So that was, I'm a nerd. So
that is cool. I love that 8-year-old you had the foresight to just be realistic. Too funny. You have the voice for it.
I'm not going to make it.
What about you?
I feel like I answered this question recently, but I wanted to be a zookeeper because I liked animals, and that was the only way I knew how to hang out with animals. So I still hang out with a bunch of animals.
Okay.
I was talking about the children.
Not me. No. Oh man. All right, that was fun.
Cool. Steve, say hi to everybody. Tell them where you live and what you're doing right now.
Yeah. So like Josh said, my name is Steve. My wife, Erin, and I live in Anchorage, Alaska with our dog, Cade. And we've been here for the last 8 years. And our ministry is kind of 2 parts. We direct Chi Alpha, so a college ministry on the campus of University of Alaska, Anchorage. And we also co-direct a nonprofit called Alaska Student Partnership, which is just seeking to see Chi Alpha alumni, college alumni, use their degrees to become marketplace missionaries amongst the 100 villages in Alaska that don't have a consistent gospel witness. And so, that's kind of the two hats that I wear in my life.
So when you say an Alaskan village, can you give us context of what does that really mean? What does that look like?
Yeah. So an Alaskan village would be a community of Alaskan Native peoples. Many of them are what we would call being off the road system, meaning that the only way to get to them is by bush plane, sled dog, or snowmobile, or boat,
bush
I guess.
Plane lands on water, correct?
No, bush planes can land on water if they have
Okay.
floats, but most bush planes would land on a runway in these villages.
Oh my goodness.
A gravel runway. And so, some of these villages, kind of to give you an idea, when you look at a map of Alaska, it's always usually it's in the lower left-hand corner of your map of America.
Yeah.
And it's about the size of Hawaii. And what people don't realize is that from the easternmost part to the westernmost part of Alaska would be like going from Florida to California. To the northernmost part, if that were overlaid on Bismarck, the southernmost part would be in Texas. And so it's a giant land area, and roads only exist on a fourth of it. And out in the non-road system part of Alaska are hundreds of villages that, many of which don't have a consistent gospel witness, meaning the gospel has come there, but there's no one there permanently to disciple and minister to these people. So, yeah.
So, Steve, when you showed up at college, when I met you at NDSU, were you doing an engineering degree? What were you studying? Architecture?
I was studying architecture. Yep.
Yeah. And there's a lot there that we could talk about. You came to know the Lord, got real serious about your faith, felt called into ministry. And then there ultimately came a moment of should I stay or should I go? And just, can you talk to us about how God led you out of a place where you're in pretty close proximity to your family, to Aaron's family, to, taking the flight or a 50-hour drive up to Anchorage?
It's 60 hours of road time.
Yeah. Have you driven it?
Yeah. Yeah. We drove up. When we moved up, we drove.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. I never want to do it again, but it was amazing. So, yeah. Yeah, that's so kind of a very long story, right? Condensed short. I went to Alaska for the first time as a college student when I was a junior. And it was there. I had no idea that this road system, off the road system world existed. I had no idea that villages existed, and I had no idea that the needs in the villages existed. And we were working at a youth camp in the westernmost part of Alaska. So we were closer to Russia than we were an American road. And we were working at this rural camp where all these students came to camp by boat. And I started to hear these students' stories, and these stories just broke my heart. I had no idea that this need existed in our backyard. We preached the gospel that week at camp. We saw some of the most incredible miracles I've ever seen at this camp. Healings and spiritual healing, physical healing, emotional healing. Jesus came in and did what Jesus does. And then we put these kids back on boats and waved goodbye as many of them went back to villages without pastors or really anybody to give them any type of sustained care, spiritual care, and hope. And I remember as a junior in college, I was standing on the riverbanks of the Yukon River watching this happen. And I started to cry. And I remember thinking to myself, this is really stupid. Somebody needs to do something about this. And it was in that moment that the Lord just kind of whispered in my ear, well, maybe you should do something about it. And later on, I was on the campus of UAA back in Anchorage, which is a large city. And I was walking on campus, and I was just praying and asking the Lord about what his will for my life was. And I was on that campus, and I remember doing some research and finding out that there was not a single college ministry on the campus of UAA. And, I was at North Dakota State at the time, where honestly, I could have picked from one of 12 different ministries to go to. And I remember thinking to myself, this is really stupid. Somebody needs to do something about this. And the Lord said, well, maybe you should do something about it. I was like, well, Lord, which one do you want me to do? Village ministry or Chi Alpha ministry here? And I think it was maybe the most clear word I've ever received from the Lord. He just said, Steve, I've broken your heart for both places because I want to use college ministry to impact every single corner of the state of Alaska. And I said, that sounds like fun. Let's do that. And so I think, I wish I could tell you that everything from that point forward was like super easy. And I was super confident, and I just was the good missionary who sold everything he had and went to Alaska. It took a lot of wrestling even after that to finally pull the trigger, to say goodbye to family, to say goodbye to the people that I love, to say goodbye to Fargo, to say goodbye to North Dakota State University. I had changed my major at that point to teaching, and I ended up getting a teaching job in Fargo that I really loved and really was enjoying, which I also had to say goodbye to. But it was honestly, I think what it was for me was this, just this knowledge and knowing that, like, man, like, if not us, then who, right? Like, who's going to go? People aren't lining up to do this. People aren't lining up to go to villages in Alaska. They're not lining up to do Chi Alpha in Alaska. And Lord, you've broken my heart. And so I'm gonna, let's do it. So, there was a lot of anxiety, but it was also, obviously, looking back now, it was the best decision Aaron and I ever made. So.
It's funny about the three of us is that none of us are actually doing what we wanted to do when we were growing up.
And thank God, right?
And none of us are doing what we went to college for either. So even that question of like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm like, I don't know, if I was a kid again, I would say, I'm going to be whatever God wants me to be.
Right.
That's what's actually going to happen.
Yeah. So how did, I can't remember exactly how you worded it, but sending the Chi Alpha college students, in what their major has been or their career into the villages to be that gospel witness, how did that look like? How did you get to that point? And then what is God doing through it? I think that's what I would want to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we were expecting to see happen when we moved here was we were expecting that the college campus was going to kind of act as like a gathering place for people from all over the state. And so we thought, man, if we can reach Alaskan Native students from villages on the college campus, disciple them, and we will be able to effectively send them back to their villages as leaders and as disciple makers. And that was happening and has continued to happen to a certain degree, but it wasn't happening as fast as we would have liked it to be happening. We ran into a lot of challenges with that because what we found was that only 20% of rural Alaskan Native students will attempt any form of post-secondary education, and 80% of that 20% will drop out. And the vast majority of that 80% dropout rate drops out in the first 3 months of coming to school. Imagine, there's more people living in your dorm hall than lived in your entire village. You've never had to cross the street with a stoplight before, it's culture shock for these kids. And so there's just a million different challenges. And so we were growing, I don't know, I don't want to say frustrated or like discouraged. It was just like kind of like discontent. Like, God, I feel like there's something else that you want to do here. And we got a call from a friend who works up on the North Slope of Alaska, which is like a county that's the size of the state of North Dakota. And it has 8,000 people live there. Okay, so just like put that in perspective. And he said, Steve, do you have any Chi Alpha alumni looking for teaching jobs? We have 9 teacher positions open in the village of Noixit. Well, there's only 10 teacher positions in the village of Noixit, and 9 of them were going to be vacant. And so as we started to look at the landscape of Alaska, we started to realize that this is really, really common. Like hundreds of teachers quit every year because of the difficulty of living in these places. And we thought this like what if light bulb went off, right? Like, well, what if 4 or 5 of those teaching positions were held by men and women of God who wanted to live missionally, not just live for a paycheck, but live missionally, and use their degrees to become what we would call marketplace ministers, meaning they hold a marketplace job with a high amount of intentionality in a place that has literally not had, the village of Noixit has a church building that has sat empty for 25 years. And so we thought, man, the Lord might be in this. And, a teacher in a village has relational access to every single student in the village, which means they have relational access to every single parent, every single grandparent in the village. And they have a housing provided for them. They have a salary provided for them. And they have a reason to be there and be an integrated member of the community, and not have to be the great missionary who's come to fix all of their problems, which missiologically and culturally is a really, really big deal here in the state. And so, and we really thought that like what we're going to ask college students to do is not easy, but who is better suited than people who are young and want to experience adventure and honestly like want to go full send for Jesus for the gospel, right? Like, because this requires you to go full send. There's nothing half send about living in these places. And so that's kind of how that whole vision was like kind of birthed, and the Lord has used it in a really incredible way.
Wow.
What?
It's awesome. It's really, I mean, I've just kind of lived through seeing it all develop and, and grow and change. And so I know, I just think God puts people in strategic places, and I know you well enough to know that you're like me, that the undercurrent sometimes is like, man, am I the right person? Like there's just those moments of discouragement or like, is this vision ever going to really be a reality? Or did I just think I had a good idea, or is this the Lord, and like we wrestle at times. But I just think over 9 years, God has proven that he picked you for that state, that it was more than just a university. It was more than just Anchorage, it's bigger. And so one of the things I love about you is just your willingness to say, okay, Lord, like I'll step out. And I know that led you guys to not only doing Chi Alpha at UAA, but also starting a nonprofit and the work that you've been doing through that. And so I think I just want everybody who's listening again to like bring it back home for a second of like, this all started like on a missions trip, right? Mm-hmm. Where you're going about your everyday life. And I always call it like it's like when you're going through the intersections of life and God just T-bones you and you never expected him to hit you. Like you thought you were just going to do a week-long trip, come home, move on. And then God just meets you. And that's like the point that I want to pull out to people is to take note of those moments where it's like, I was going along on my way and God intersected what I was doing with his plan. And then that decision of like, okay, so will I say yes to his plan? Mm-hmm. And so maybe there's people listening and you're at that moment where God did that in the past and you haven't responded and you're actually out of step with what God asked you to do, or people who right now are in a moment of discerning, is this something larger that God's trying to do? And just giving God yes when those moments come to pass. And I've just seen you consistently do that, you and Aaron.
Yeah, I think as I look back at the last 9 years, had the Lord shown me everything that was going to be happening in those 9 years, like overwhelmed me and, totally freaked me out. And I tell our college students this all the time, that like, so often we ask the Lord for the 5-year plan, when we're not willing to just be obedient in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And 5 minutes of obedience added up eventually becomes a 5-year plan that is far better orchestrated and far better woven together than anything we could have ever sat down and come up with as we sat through a long-term planning meeting. And so this was not like the vision to see every single corner of the state of Alaska impacted has always been there, but that's pretty vague and pretty broad. And the details of that, I feel like the Lord has just woven together with 5 minutes of obedience. And as you look back, you're like, oh, like that was actually pretty smart. I didn't even know what I was doing, but that was actually pretty wise. Thank you, Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I love it when he lets us see those things in hindsight. And then it's like, oh yeah, well, Steve, yeah, you had nothing to do with that. That was my idea. So, but good job. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love what you said about just at the beginning. I totally lost my train of thought.
All right, you interrupt me when it comes back.
Okay, you go.
I want to hear, like, what have you seen as these teachers? Has it been primarily teachers, or has there been other professions that the villages have needed as well?
Yeah, the biggest need is in what we would call our second flight villages. So that's where the biggest need for the gospel is. Second, there's hub villages, and then there's second flight villages. And the second flight villages are much smaller. They don't really have any type of strong local economy. So really the only jobs that require an education are the teaching jobs. And so the vast majority of these people doing marketplace ministry are teachers. We have a few people that are like pilots, nurses, IT directors in our hub villages. But most of them are teachers. And so, and right now the beauty is that they've been able to go to these places in teams. And so they've been able to do ministry together. So like we have 6 teachers in one village, we have 4 teachers in another, 3 in another. And they're all pretty close to each other. They're all within like a half-hour boating distance. So they're able to see each other often and really be able to do ministry as a family. And really the fruit that we've seen, it's building trust in these places is very slow. Every single one of our teachers that is out there had students the first month of school tell them, I don't need to listen to you. You are going to be gone in 3 months. And that's the reality. Like the average stay of a teacher in a village is less than 1 year. So for every teacher that you have stay 20 years, you have 20 teachers that don't even make it through one school year. And so that's by far the most that's a very common thing. And so like the fact that our teachers came back or have stayed, have come back, and then have really embraced the culture and the lifestyle, have said yes to invitations to go fishing, have said yes to invitations to go hunting, have said yes to go camping and do the stuff that people in the village love to do, has opened the door for relationship. And that relationship has opened the door for gospel conversations. And those gospel conversations have opened the door for discipleship to start, for, small group Bible studies to start in their homes. And so they're still all navigating that and figuring this out. This whole thing is really new. But it's been, we've started now finally to see some of that fruit, and we're believing eventually, a couple years down the road, that the discipleship movement that gets sparked by these teams will eventually become indigenous and self-replicating. So, yeah.
That's amazing.
It is awesome. So the thing I was going to say was you referenced if God had shown me everything, it would have freaked me out. And I would argue if God had showed me everything, I might not have done it,
Yeah.
And I don't think I had the character to sustain it. And it's funny how you grow in that, because I was praying yesterday over our church and just like some strategic decisions that we have to make. And I realized that when I started praying, my prayer shifted. And I started saying, like, I was praying the prayer of Jabez of like, God, open doors, like make the right thing happen, And then I realized like my prayer shifted and I started saying, God, give me the character to sustain it. Like grow me as a person to be able to lead it, so that the growth doesn't outpace my growth, and just facing that when God calls you to do something of like, yeah, he shows it bit by bit because we maybe aren't mature enough or don't have the character to see the whole picture, or we would say no if we actually did see it. I think the other thing so based on what you already talked about, what I would love for you to expand on is I know you talk about second flight villages, and then there's hub villages. And so can you tell us some of the names? Because I know like Bethel is a hub. What are some of the hubs? Just like if somebody's interested and wants to look at a map and be like, where's Steve at? What's he doing? Can you tell us some of those places?
Yeah. So all of our teachers right now are located along the Kuskokwim River, which is in Western Alaska. The hub village out there is Bethel. Our teachers are located in the villages of Bethel, Akiak, Akachuk, and Tuliksak. And the villages we have targeted for planting future teams next year would be Queethluk, the Buskiak, and the Pakiak. And I'm not making those names up. They're wonderful. They're fun to say. But the other hubs, the other hub villages in Alaska would be Nome, Kotzebue, and Utqiagvik, which is formerly known as Barrow, which is way up. It's the farthest north city in America. Yeah. And
Nome is where the Iditarod race came from, right?
Yes. Yep. So the dogs are on the trail right now. So
yeah, I was going to say
our fantasy Iditarod league is up and running, and just legitimately, I'm not kidding. We have a fantasy Iditarod league, and yeah, my team currently is sitting in like 5th place in our league. It's pretty depressing, but
that is amazing. Okay.
But is your team the dogs or the mushers?
Well, I mean,
or are they
it's really all about the dogs with the Iditarod, but you draft during the fantasy draft, you draft a musher. Yeah.
Just one?
No, we draft teams of 5. And then we have like a elaborate scoring thing that gives mushers scores based off of what place they're in. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
How many mushers are there?
Oh my goodness.
Sorry,
Josh.
I'm sorry. I literally, here's the problem. Avery, Lily, and I read a book about the Iditarod last night.
I was just going to say, Avery just brought home a book. He got to do bookmobile at school, and he brought home a book about the Iditarod because he's been watching a show. I'm sorry.
Called Molly of Denali.
Molly of Denali. And he's actually very intrigued by Alaskan culture. And is it the Denali Mountains or mountain?
One mountain.
Mountain Denali?
Yeah. Yep.
So I think the timing is just, I'm laughing more at that. And he's going to be so intrigued by this. And he's going to want to have an Iditarod league or whatever. That is so funny.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun with it. We ham it up, and it's wonderful. So we have a traveling trophy for our Chi Alpha staff that your name gets printed on if you win. And yeah, Aaron's a back-to-back champion, so I'm a little upset about that. But
that's awesome. We actually did watch. I think I listened to a podcast about Balto. And really about that story, it was really the dog Togo, who should be the dog that's celebrated. Yep. And I was like telling Josh about it. I'm like, we need to watch this movie. Have you watched the movie?
Oh,
yes.
Big Togo fan.
And so I was trying to explain that to Avery.
The name of the trophy is the Togo Cup.
Yes.
Yep. To give credit where credit is due, right? Balto gets all the credit and it's garbage.
So if you're listening and you've not heard this, Balto gets all the credit, but he only did the last 50 miles, 30 miles?
Yeah, he did the last 40 miles. Yeah.
but
Balto
Togo
finished the
did
race, but Togo really ran.
like 200. I mean, the movie is incredible. Like Josh does not cry. He was like weeping
It was
at
moving.
the end. And it's a true story.
Okay, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
not weeping. You were trying to hide your heaves.
but there was, I mean,
yeah, true.
it was not about a dog. It was about the
It's
children.
just a tender spot about the children. Sorry.
Yes.
That's so fun. I love that so much. We can't wait to come visit. We'll make it happen. Yeah. Okay,
It was
before we're
highly unlikely that Togo would come in this conversation today.
I love it so much. Okay, I did want to ask this before we're done, and this is kind of a hard shift. But when we talked about full send with the podcast, we also talked about there's some people that just have full send stories. Like, what's your most full send Alaska story? Like hunting or, I just walked right into a grizzly bear, no big deal.
Or something you saw that was
Or maybe
crazy.
you tackled a mountain lion.
Yeah, man. There's a lot of them. I've been charged by grizzly bears on rivers. We've been hunting in windstorms, and I've almost had trees fall on our tents. I always tell people everything in Alaska is trying to kill you, like everything. The river, the ocean, like you come to Alaska and you're like, oh, bears. It's like bears are the least of your worries. You got like the moose are trying to kill you. The mountains are trying to kill you. The weather's trying to kill you. Every form of body of water is like trying to kill you. Like that's its goal. It feels like that. And so, we have this joke about like, lower 48ers need to find like ways to recreate. Like our recreation in bush Alaska is just called surviving. Like that's the game that we play. But I would say my most full sense story would be a time we were in Southeast Alaska, and we were going to go to a lodge that's owned by one of our Chi Alpha alumni. And he was just going to let us come out, do some fishing and bear hunting. And we landed in Ketchikan, Alaska. He picked us up from the airport on a boat. And he said, the king salmon are biting. We got to fish on the way back. And we were going out to this island. And we were slaying the king salmon. And I was reeling one in. And this orca, killer whale, surfaced like 200 yards away. And I'm like, wow, this is such an experience. I'm reeling in a king salmon and there's orcas swimming around. And all of a sudden, like the orca is like 100 yards away, and then the orca is 50 yards away. And my friend goes, Steve, you have to reel faster. I'm like, I'm reeling as fast as I can. So all of a sudden I get this big tug on my pole. I'm like, what the heck? And I reel up the fish. The orca now surfaces 10 feet behind the boat, 6-foot dorsal fin, flopping in the air. I pull up the fish out of the water. All that's left is the head with guts hanging out of the bottom. He had swam up behind my fish and knew that it was on a line, so stinking smart, that he just bit the body off and left the head. So for a second, for a split second, I was fighting on a rod and reel a killer whale, which was pretty fun to be able to say.
I think
fast forward 3 hours later, we land the boat and we jump in a truck to go bear hunting. And we came across that's a whole nother story. But like we came across a 7'2" black bear, and I harvested the largest black bear I'd ever harvested in my life. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Like
so all of that happened in 3 hours.
7 feet tall. Is that what you mean? Or what did you say?
It means 7'2" means he squared out at 7'2". Yeah.
Oh my
so he was like his arm span was like 7'6", and his tip to tail was like 6 foot, whatever it would have been, 6'10" or whatever. So yeah.
And This just makes me so eager to come visit. I view life through a filter of safety. So, I'm like terrified, but I have so much respect for you guys.
I know. I don't know if the land and everything's trying to kill you, or if you're out searching for it. I'm like fishing for orcas and
no, but it's funny, and not to like turn it back to like, do a Jesus juke here and turn it back to spiritual, but I really think there's I think the reason the need in Alaska exists the way it does is because we just have gotten so comfortable as Christians. And there is a high degree of risk. And every time I get into that position, like, cause I'll be honest with you, like I've been scared many times. Like we were taking our missionaries, we had our missionaries come in for like a resourcing weekend, and we were taking them back on a river, and it started to pouring rain, and it started to get dark, and you don't want to be on a river when it's dark, especially these rivers are really big and dangerous. And it was like in that moment, I remember thinking like, okay, Jesus, like, I know that you're with me. And I just kept trying to like go into this mentality of like missionaries in the past that did like far more extreme things. Like my predecessors came to this area to be missionaries. They didn't have power boats. They didn't have Zoom to call their family. They didn't have, they didn't have any of those amenities. Like when they said goodbye to their families, they literally said goodbye. When I compare my life to my life previously in the lower 48, it would give me anxiety. But when I compare my life to what people did for the gospel 100, 500,000 and 2,000 years ago, it's like, this really isn't anything. And I can do this. I can do this for Jesus. And what I found is that it actually becomes a lot of fun. It's like I'm driving a boat with Jesus right now, and this is pretty cool. So I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but
yeah, it brings a nice pang of conviction to me. So I'm being serious, and that's beautiful. And I love that. It does challenge me in a good way. You can go visit.
I want to. We're going to make it happen.
You're going to have a blast.
Steve, so we're going to close this off in just a second, but I really want people to hear from you about the project coming out of Bethel right now. So for those of you that are listening that are part of the Evangel family, we support Steve and Aaron through Legacy Makers, and we're going to do that in a bigger way. I'm getting leaky right now. The staff says, Josh, you leak information. Well, I'm doing it. And
well, if you listen to Highly Unlikely consistently all the way to the last 5 minutes of the episode, get rewarded.
You get rewarded. Yep.
Yeah.
And if you come to prayer nights, that's the other time.
That's true.
But Steve's going to come on Legacy Makers Sunday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. And he's going to talk about this project that's happening. He's going to talk about what's happening in Alaska, but really this project that is in line with everything we've already talked about. But can you tell them the name of the project, kind of what's coming out of Bethel, and what you guys see happening over the next couple of years?
Yeah. So as already mentioned, Bethel is a hub village in Alaska, and it services 56 different villages. Many of those villages are on that list of 100 without a consistent gospel witness. And so we've identified it a long time ago as probably the most strategic hub for rural ministry of anywhere in our state. And Bethel is also, like, that area of Alaska is also the poorest region of Alaska. So that's another reason that there's just a ton of need in those places. And for whatever reason, we enjoy going to that type of place. So that's where we decided to start this whole movement, was in that region of Alaska. And over the course of the last 3 years, we've had 30 people say yes to coming up and doing this marketplace ministry program, Next year, we're going to have 25 missionaries on the ground in rural Alaska. We'll have hopefully village team, in 5 different villages getting churches planted, with more on the way. And it was becoming logistically incredibly difficult to keep the movement unified, and keep it resourced, and make sure that we have a place to train these people and to equip these people, and then to equip future indigenous disciple makers as they get raised up. And so last summer, through a really incredible kind of miraculous provision, we were gifted a building in Bethel, Alaska, a property that if we had to buy outright would be worth about $2 million. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Do
Real
not
life.
disturb. Can we cut this, guys? I'm so sorry. Is that bad?
No, it makes it more legit. It's all good. It's all good.
My bad. I literally do not disturb turned off, and then boom, I got a phone call. It's silly. All right. Essentially we were gifted a $2 million property in Bethel, and which is incredible. And we really see this as like God providing exactly what we need at the exact right time. And what we're believing this building is going to serve as is a hub for training future marketplace ministers, a hub for resourcing those that we have on the ground, and a hub for equipping future indigenous disciple makers to ensure that this whole movement becomes self-replicating. The problem is that the building that we were gifted has a lot of work that needs to be done to it. We estimate that in order to get it to where we want it to be, as a facility that would do all of that, that we need to raise right around about $700,000 to get it back to operational, and then to put an addition on it to make it the mobilization center that we believe it can be. And so we're calling this whole initiative our Hub One initiative. And we're inviting churches and individuals to partner with us in this. And we're calling it our Hub One initiative because of the strategic hub nature of this place. But also we are believing that Marketplace Missions is going to change not just this region, but the entire state of Alaska. And that someday down the road, we have no idea when, but that there will be a Hub 2 initiative as this continues to expand.
That's amazing. Josh hadn't told me any of that yet.
No, it's like,
that's amazing.
I don't think I could explain it all as well as you just did.
Right.
What,
Wow.
Can people get information, or is that coming?
That'll be coming very soon. We'll have our Hub One initiative website up shortly. We'll have a video that's being produced right now, actually, that's going to spell that out and really show that need in more detail. And then, I'll be talking about it when I'm there next fall.
That's awesome.
Cool. Can't wait. Steve, I'm so grateful for you. I think if I put your life in biblical terms, it's like somebody who came to know Jesus, became a follower of Jesus, stepped into ministry, and now you're a modern day apostle. Like just you're leading leaders of people. And I know none of us are doing this for our own record books, but I know what you're doing is in the record books of eternity, and it's just making a massive difference. And you and Aaron together, because man, when you left, she went with you, and we know that you guys are all in. You've left your careers to do this, and we just think that's a life that is totally full send and worth giving honor to. And so we're grateful to know you guys to get to journey together. And thanks for being on today and just sharing your heart and helping everybody see maybe their part in the full send journey that God might have for them.
Well, and thank you, Josh. I appreciate that. Can I share one more thing?
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was a junior in college going to Alaska for the very first time. I was in the airport in Denver on my way. I was about to board a flight to Anchorage, and I was scared and nervous, and I was going to spend a whole summer in Alaska. And I was like, I knew I was going to be struggling with homesickness and missing home. And so I called one of my college friends who happened to be Josh Shaldahl. And you said something that I'll never forget. You prayed for me. You said everything was going to be okay. And then before you got off the phone, you said, go step into your destiny. You probably don't remember saying that.
I don't even remember that phone call, but wow.
I'll never forget that conversation. And I really think the Holy Spirit was in that comment. That it was like, hey, like, yeah, this is a big step, but there's going to be something on the other side of it that's going to make it all worth it. So, yeah. Wow. So thanks, Josh.
That's amazing.
The Lord uses us in each other's lives in beautiful ways.
That is such an example of, you might think you're just saying something, but the Lord's using it in such a powerful way. Well, we love you guys, and we continue to pray for you and everything that God is leading you in Alaska. And I even pray and hope that people listen to this and maybe they're a teacher or they feel called, and the Lord can call whoever to wherever, whenever. And that's just exciting to me. So thank you for sharing with us. I'm encouraged for sure and challenged in a good way as well. So to live highly unlikely and to live full send. So if you were listening and appreciated the conversation, share it with a friend or rate and subscribe to the podcast, all the things. We say the same things every time. So just do them, please. And we will see you next time.